Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Now in today's video we're going to be tackling how to get one of my favourite guitar tones of all time. That is Mr. Isaac Hale's guitar tone from the band Knocked Loose. So before we get started with today's video, I just want to take a little moment to introduce myself and talk a little bit about the channel as well. So my name's Ben, and if you subscribe over on the Andertons YouTube channel, you might have seen me from a couple of videos over there. I tend to front a lot of the metal stuff. I do the Sound Like series with John Connon, and we've got a great set of videos that are going to be coming up this year. So make sure you go and hit the subscribe button over on their channel as well. But more importantly, hit the subscribe button on my channel. This is the first video in, I don't suppose you can call it a series, but a series of videos where I break down some of my favourite guitar tones and how to get them using the Line 6 Helix. So I'm super stoked for it. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, and again, make sure you drop in comments below on my videos because I'm pretty receptive to any guitar tones you might want me to tackle. But with that being said and done, in today's video we're going to be looking at Isaac Hale's guitar tone specifically from Knocked Loose. Isaac's got one of my favourite guitar tones I've ever heard. From the first Knocked Loose track I heard from Tearing the Fabric of Life EP, I was gripped straight away. It is a complete wall of sound, but it is worth mentioning that production guitar tones and live tones are completely different. I know live that Isaac uses the quad cortex with a couple of orange 412s behind him, whereas in the studio they'll be using obviously the 5153 amp. And if you look at one of Will Putney's breakdown videos, there are so many guitar tracks on there which get that big wall of sound. So obviously I am one man and I'm working with a single channel of guitar tones today, so we're going to be doing our best to get as close as we can using the stock features on the Line 6 Helix. So enough waffling from me, let's hear what we're working with today, and then we're going to break it down how I got those guitar sounds. Okay then guys, so let's go ahead and have a look at how I got to that sound. There's a few things worth mentioning beforehand. Isaac obviously uses a really nice 7-string Ibanez Iceman with his, I think they're Demarcio Fusion Edge pickups. I only own a 6-string, so what I've done, I've got this strung with my SIT 1156 power wound strings, and I've tuned it to what would be A standard, which is what they primarily play in, minus the top string there. So it's as close as I can get with the resources I have. But let's have a look at the tone here. So it's really simple. You can see I've got 6 blocks here, and what we're going to do, we're going to start with just the amp and cab. So as I said earlier in the video, Isaac uses a 5153 in the studio and on his quad cortex as well, and they've switched, I think it's only recently for this album cycle, to orange 412s. They were using Mesa before. I think that the tones off the latest album are my favourite, so I'm going with the, not necessarily 412s, because the Helix doesn't have any orange 412s on it. Well, it does, but they're the Eminence loaded speakers, and they're not quite right for this sound. So this is based off just a standard orange PPC 212 with vintage 30s. I'm miking them both with an SM57. One is directly in the center to get all that harsh top end there. No distance whatsoever between the mic and the grill cloth. And then the second one, again, as close mic as you can get it, but ever so slightly off center as well. So let's see what we're dealing with in the basic amp and cab sound. So it's pretty crunchy as guitar tones go. You can see I'm running the gain pretty low. I mean, these amps have a hell of a lot of gain in them anyway, and I'm making a lot of use out of the presence and highs here to give it a little bit of sparkle alongside having the mic so close to the center of the cone. One thing that I did mess about a lot with is the sag on the amplifier. So the lower you have that set, the tighter the response is, because, and you'll see later in the EQ blocks, we're going to be messing around with the low end quite a lot. So the sag is set pretty low on that. But where most of the legwork comes from here is this, which is our sort of distortion pedal block. Now, Isaac is famous for using the Swollen Pickle by Way Huge, which is their jumbo fuzz pedal, but the Helix doesn't have one. So the closest thing that I found is their Swedish Chainsaw, which is based off a Boss HM2, and that's as close as we can get it. So let's have a quick listen without it and then with it. And that's how you get that really gritty, in your face, just broken sound that Isaac loves. Now, because the amp is still doing a decent amount of legwork in the gain section, it's just crunching it, I'm not actually using any drive at all from the pedal. The level itself is obviously set quite high because I want that characteristic to come through. But if not, I'm working with a lot of gain here anyway, but it just becomes ever so slightly too undefined. So again, knocking the highs up and a lot of bass for that rounded bottom end there as well. Now, you won't be able to hear this because I've cut a lot of it out, but a crucial thing you're going to need is a noise gate. So if I just introduce it here in the signal for a split second, and then obviously taking it out again, that's what I'm hearing in the studio out of the monitors right now. So whack a noise gate in there, treat it like you would any normal amp. So I'm having it at the end of my chain before the amp and setting a pretty tight threshold on this noise gate, and the decay set pretty minimal as well, just for that tight response. So there's not a lot of, glory to the noise gate there, but it's doing what it needs to. Now, where I did a lot of experimentation here, I've got two EQ blocks. So let's look at the first one. Here I'm using a low and high cut. Now, one thing in my line of work, having used the Quad Cortex quite a lot, it's got a fantastic low end response. It's something, in my opinion, that with the stock cabs on the Line 6 Helix, it can lack. So what I've not cut any lows out, but what I have done, just to get rid of a bit of that sort of fizz, I've done a relatively, I wouldn't say a harsh cut, but a bit of a deeper cut in at the 14K there. So let's just hear it without. Then with it in. And that's just getting rid of a lot of that fizz there. Like with a lot of this, if you're listening to it through a phone speaker, you're probably not going to hear a lot of these differences, but through a decent set of headphones, studio monitors, you will. Now, this final EQ block here, I've got a low and a high shelf, and this is what, in my opinion, really brings this tone to life. So I've gone pretty extreme here, and most sound engineers would probably crucify me for if you looked at this at first glance, but actually if you just kind of listen with your ears, what I've done here makes sense. So as I said before, that the Helix does lack sometimes a little bit of that low thump that you would get from something like a QC or that would represent a real amplifier. So at about 300 Hertz, I've actually done a pretty extreme high shelf just to boost a bit of that low end there. And whilst we've cut a lot of the fizz out of the high end, I still wanted to add just a little bit of that horrible grittiness that you'd usually get around the 4K mark. Now I don't know if you're able to see it on camera, but I've got a Marshall, that's my sort of main amp, if you will, and Marshalls tend to be pretty extreme in that 4K mark, so I'm used to usually dialing that out. But for this sound, I really wanted it in your face and gritty, so again, a pretty extreme boost there, but it complements the sound of this HM2 really well. So let's hear it without. And then in. In my opinion, that's where you really hear this patch come to life. Like I say, you look at it and you go, it doesn't work, but actually, and we're all guilty of this, dialing with our eyes, if you actually just listen to it, and I've based a lot of this off listening to the Premier Guitar Rig rundown that Isaac did, where you can really hear his live sound, and it has got so much low-end weight to it. And I find, particularly if you're listening through a set of studio monitors or trying this out at home, trying this patch and just turning the blocks on and off, you'll really hear that come to life, and that's where that thump comes from. But like I say, this is a really, really simple patch here. 6 blocks, but I think it gets relatively close with it. So there you have it, guys. That is how I got Isaac Hale's guitar sound from Knocked Loose, or at least that's how I got as close as I did. But let me know in the comments how I did. Did you think that I got it fairly close? Is there anything you'd change about it? Did it completely suck ass? If it did, let me know. If you've managed to do better, then hopefully this has at least set you on the right ballpark. And like all of these tones as well, it's available on the custom tone sort of cloud on the Line 6 website. So I'm going to make all of these tones free and accessible to all Line 6 Helix users. I've been using Helix native, but this will translate absolutely fine to any rack mount or floor units you may have as well. Make sure you drop a comment as well if there's anyone else you'd like me to tackle, any other guitar tones. I want it to be a pretty collaborative input. It'll also challenge me as well and probably open up some new avenues of music taste for me as well. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button on your way out the door. But guys, it's been a pleasure, and I will see you on the next one.